and you're going to need to restart the engines and and you can't connect to the internet and you're done. Sorry, Dave. How? No connection. Yeah, that'd be great. We need to rewrite that one, right? Oh, anyway. This is chapter 10. And that's really funny because I got it backwards. NIV, that's 10:1. What is really important about this, and I already started a little bit, I think we touched on the beginning of this, but we'll go back over it. Remember, this is the chapter breaks were added, right? There is no break. At the end of the section of the man who was born blind, the big deal was the Pharisees asked, are we therefore, the Pharisees with Jesus, not just any Pharisees, Jesus's Pharisees. And I hate to point this out, but remember, I love to point this out. Jesus is obviously the rabbi of Capernaum. He's obviously that rabbi, right? He's obviously the rabbi of Capernaum. And so he would be considered a Pharisee. Remember, Nicodemus calls him the rabbi, right? Calls him a rabbi. He's a rabbi. He's therefore a Pharisee. He's got a card. I got a Pharisee card right here, okay? And his best friend, or one of his cousin anyway, John the Immerser, he's got a Sadducee card. We really think about this, right? I thought it was really interesting. Tammy started me watching The Chosen with her, and in The Chosen, one of the first things that Nicodemus says is, we got the Essenes, the Zealots, the Pharisees, and the Sadducees. And I'm like, or I think maybe one of the Romans says that. And I'm like, holy smoke, they read the list. There's two others that I think Origen mentions that we can't find in history. And I don't remember what their names are, but the four big ones, and the fifth is Teen Hodos. But we'll see think they'll mention that. But as I was saying, the most important thing is this is not the end, because we got to the part where Jesus destroys the regular Pharisees and the Sadducees, the ones that are called Judeans by the general thing. And by the way, like I said, I think I'm going to put them up. Let's put them up in the list. The number 2 smartest guy is the man who was born blind, next to the woman from Samaria. Incredible. He blows them away so bad that they kick him out of the synagogue. And he didn't even proclaim that Jesus was Christ. Jesus had to go to him and say, hey, do you believe in basically the Christ? And the guy goes, tell me who he is, right? And he was convinced. He was convinced so much that he fell down on his face and worshiped. But then that's not the end of the story. The next part is the Pharisees. So are we therefore blind? And that goes directly into this part. This has a chapter separation, but there's no separation. So when it says, these are the Pharisees, these are Jesus's Pharisees. These are his buds. These are his guys. We're going to find out later that, remember the guy that was raised from the dead, Lazarus? Guess who he probably is? He's probably the rabbi of Bethany. And he's for sure got a Pharisee card. Doesn't tell us directly that Jesus is the rabbi of Capernaum. But the evidence is there. Wait till we get to Lazarus and we see the evidence. The evidence, I think, is amazing. Remember, if people say, well, is John trying to hide anything? No, it's just the way that Greek is, okay? Number one, how much am I paying for every word? I'm paying $50,000 for this document, right? To have some guy do it for me. My Libreus is doing it. It's going to cost me big money. That's a big deal. So every word, every letter is worth something. So therefore, I'm not going to restate stuff that everybody knows, right? Everybody knows that Lazarus is probably the rabbi of Capernaum, of Bethany. Everybody knows that Jesus is the rabbi of Capernaum. Everybody knows this. I don't need to tell you. The only time I need to tell you something is when it's new information or different information. That's the way Greek works. Plus, Greek is really terse. So we get to this point, and I put it, okay, this is what the NIV, the Good Shepherd and his sheep. But this is really the continuation of the man who was born blind. So it says, very truly I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs by some other way is a thief and a robber. Okay. Well, I went over this before anyway, but I'll do it again because I think it's really fun. Especially to know where we're going, right? Verily, verily, I say to you, he that enters not by the door into the sheepfold, but climbeth up some other way, the same as a thief and a robber. We're going to get to the sheepfold thing. This is, amen, I make a logical argument, Lego, to you. May or not least, this qualified negation, coming or going into, through, of a door into the courtyard of the probaton, something that walks forward a sheep. Other things, contrariwise, footing up, climbing up from another place. That one there is a thief who steals by stealth in secret is an alestis, a thief or robber stealing in the open, typically with violence. So all of it, you know, it's both the one who does it in secret and the one who beats you up in the street, which is both bad, I think. In New York, that's just normal. Anyway, firmly, I make a logical argument to you, not coming into through the gate into the courtyard of the something that walks toward the sheep. I'm going to say sheep from then on. I just wanted to leave this at first because isn't it interesting? And I don't know why. Why do the Greeks use that term, right? They have a term that is a very kind of specific, as if everyone knows, you know, what, that a sheep, can sheep move backwards? Not move backwards? Oh, I have no idea. I'm not a shepherd. Has anybody been a shepherd here? Does anyone know?
I think I Googled that one time, and they have an issue about something like that.
Yeah?
It refers to the fact that they just follow, stumble forward without really thinking.
Yeah.
Maybe.
They're led. And
Dogs have a problem walking backwards. But dogs can't walk backwards. Horses can. Right? Your dog, try to get your dog to go backward. Dogs will not go backward. You lift them on their legs, you can kind of, if their front legs are lifted, they'll kind of stagger back, but they won't walk backward. I don't know.
It says when sheep sense danger, they walk backward. I forget. I just had this conversation with someone.
I don't know why it is, but for some reason the Greeks, the word probaton means, in Greek, something that works forward, and it's sheep. And like I say, Greek is concrete. So we need to ask the Greeks, I guess. You can't ask them. They're gone, all the ancient Greeks. So whoever made that up, right? Anyway, contrary-wise, climbing up from another place, that one there is a thief who steals by stealth in secret, and a robber stealing the open, typically with violence. Okay, and I've got whatever. These are just my notes, and if we need to go over some words, we can get it. Here's what they say about probaton. Properly refers to any animal that grazes, goes out to pasture, but especially the sheep. Whatever. You know, they all look like sheep to me.
the farmer I worked for always said that when we were herding cattle, he always say, if you want to know where they're going, they're always going to look where they're going to go. So if you want to know where they're going to go, he says their eyes are going to point where they're going to go.
So if they're looking at you, they're going to run you down, right?
They're figuring out where they want to get.
Yeah, I'm, anything that's bigger than me, I kind of worry about. Usually sheep are smaller, but still I stay out of their way. They got really sharp hooves. Anyway, let's see. These are just notes. Let's see, the thief, Lestus. The previous logos ended with the man being kicked out of doors. In direct context to this logo in chapter 10. The question is, who interacted in the temple or the synagogue through the doors not accessible to the people? I think this is an interesting question. I think I already concluded. We saw the pictures. Oh, there we go. Here's the synagogues and churches in the ancient style. There are no other doors. So the only way to get in here is to sneak in through some other way, right? So I thought that was interesting in itself. Both the, and what I also thought was very interesting is that the way that the churches, early churches, the ones that are above ground were put together are very similar to the way synagogues were put together. This is too idyllic. I want to mention to you that all the early churches we know of, there are no early churches that are above ground. All the early churches that we know of are underground. Antioch, for example, the early church they found there was underground. The crypt churches in Rome even, and the crypt churches, the reason we think that's true, this is a historical sideline. The reason we think that's true, two reasons. Number one, Christianity was being persecuted like crazy in the time. They were being persecuted by the Jews because they're Teen Hodos, the fifth sect of Judaism. They're being persecuted by the Greeks to a degree. Although the Greeks are joining in droves, they're being persecuted by the Romans, until Constantine, until 300. So, Christians are kind of in a bad point. And the biggest problem with the Christians, what's the biggest thing about Christians that's causing them problems with the Jews and causing them problems with the Romans? And partially with the Greeks for that reason. What's the biggest problem?
With the Romans, isn't it the biggest problem that they won't worship the emperor?
Not yet. That'll occur. That gets even worse.
So remember in a college class where we talked about this, the professor was talking about all the misunderstandings that society had about Christians, like that they met at night, so they were doing witchcraft, they were cannibals because they drank, the blood and ate the body of, and that they were even like doing incest because greet one another with a brotherly kiss and things. Like there was a whole bunch of things where they were thought to be doing these like dark and bad things. So
Yeah.
society was looking down on them.
I didn't prepare my whole list of the Mysterion stuff, but the Mysterion folks were doing all that and more. The Mysterion, classically Mysterion, shared meals, kiss, signs, symbols, change of, baptism, usually with water, with blood in some places. I mean, huge things. Mysterions tend to meet at night. I'm gonna bring it up, but I think the biggest reason is because what did the Romans, you could have any religion you wanted, but what did the Roman law say you couldn't do? No religion could do it. Proselytize, yes. What were the Christians doing like crazy?
The Great Commission. They had to go out and spread the gospel.
Yeah, and you know what? The problem is, I don't know whether they were dumb or they were just Christians, because it's kind of like when you see there's a great sale at Walmart or wherever you go, right? And you go, hey, Pat, I know you want a fishing pole, and Walmart's got these fishing poles there for $5, the whole kit and everything. And you go, oh, cool, I'm going to Walmart. What were the Christians doing? They didn't believe they were proselytizing. What were they doing?
They were just saying, hey, I saw someone get healed, and it was amazing, come listen to the guy.
Yeah. Well, they were telling them the mystery of faith. We have a mysterion. They weren't saying that, but they were saying, we have a mystery too. Christ has died. Christ is risen. Christ come again. And everybody who heard it that was in the area, what did they say? Well, yeah, we heard about this Jesus guy, right? This guy died and he was killed by the Romans. And what happened to him? They can't hide it. This happened, right? They had all these witnesses, not just all these witnesses. It happened during the Passover when there was 1 million people, we think, in Jerusalem. What do you think happened when those 1 million people, where'd they go? They went off. They went home. And then what happened? We don't.
You can't wait to tell somebody.
Not only can you not wait, when they had the next festival, the Purim, and then the festival of of loaves, right? The loaves, the bringing of the law. The next thing that happened was Pentecost. And at Pentecost, why do you think all these people were in Jerusalem from everywhere? I think that they came because they heard that this Jesus guy rose from the dead, and they wanted to see what was going on. And so you had even more people than were normal in Jerusalem. And, we know that when they did the, they did a census, that they say, that there was at least 20,000 people in Jerusalem who were Christians, which either exceeded the population or was, a fifth of the population, as small as a fifth of the population of the whole Jerusalem. You're talking about huge amounts of people here that are Christians, and it looks like a mysterion. And so I think all those features that I'm sorry your professor mentioned were positives.
Well, I might be misremembering. Maybe that was problems that the Jews had with teen photos rather than the Romans. But
It could be because, Teen Hodos was Jewish, and they followed all the Jewish everything. But Teen Hodos looked like a mysterion. And the big deal of mysterion is, where did the Mithrin mysterions meet? They met in caves, in darkness. And Jesus even talks about it. Don't cover your light with a bushel. That's Mithrin worship. That's exactly what the Mithrins did. The Mithrins would take their light and they would cover it with a bushel, and they would all go down into the cave, and they would all at one point in the prayer, in their sequence of prayer, in their mysterion, they would show the light. What did the Christians do? They said, this is cool, we like this. And so they began to infiltrate the Mithrin worship. We know this because we see later, not much later, very shortly later, that the Mithrin worship was one of the main worships of the centurions and the legions. Who were the first people that wanted to talk to Paul? Remember? Or to Peter. Peter was talked to by Cornelius, who was a legion, a centurion at least, but part of the legions. Why? Because he was into the Mithrin worship. And obviously Christianity was already infiltrating Mithrin worship. And then we see what with Paul and the centurion, right? And we see the legions, especially we see the information that comes from in Hebrews. It looks like the legions and the Romans are some way participating with Christianity, and we don't know how, but it's Christianity was moving like crazy, and they were getting in trouble with the Romans because the Romans' law said you can't proselytize. And so they were having to hide what they were doing. So all the early churches were underground because the Mithrin worship was underground. And now the proof text, what's the birth of Mithras? 25 December. Mithras was born in 25 December. Where did that come from in Christianity? It was borrowed because all the festivals were borrowed. The festival of Easter is Hestia. Easter, the word comes from Hestia. Hestia was the virginal goddess of the hearth, and her celebration always happens at Easter. So you have the Hebrew, the Jewish Teen Hodos, and you have the Christians infiltrating the Greek and the Roman worship. And it's genius. That's the way to do it if you want to do it. Don't ignore Halloween. Do what? Take it over.
have a fall festival.
Well, call it Halloween. Just do it with a Christian flair. I think that's what really happened. And I think I mentioned this before. If you look at, we've studied, like, for example, Thessalonians and other things, and in every one of the books of the New Testament of Paul's writings, Paul doesn't tell them not to worship with them. Paul tells them to participate in the festivals, but just to do what? Christianize it. Do it in the name of Christ. And so what I think happened is the Christians, for example, in the Bacchus ritual, the kids got a liter. The parents got 2 liters of wine in the Bacchus festival. In the Bacchus festival, the girls dressed up like boys and had like phalluses, the fake phalluses. The boys dressed up like girls. And there was no sexual anything going on, but it was, the Bacchus thing. But everybody got wine. I think the Christians said, hey, bring your wives, bring your slaves, bring your people. We will have the Bacchus festival. But, our main guy is Christ. And you can come, and we got drinks, we got food, but we're going to help make sure your kids are safe. We got the blessing place, right? We got a place for the kids. We got a place for your wives to be safe. Because obviously, adults drinking 2 liters of wine and kids drinking a liter of wine, this can't be a happy situation for the city. I'm just saying. So, if Christians came in with that kind of attitude and that kind of, protection, right? And that's what we see in all the letters to Paul. Paul was totally into the men and women actually getting together in the worship in their synagogue. They separated them intentionally because why? The Greek worship did not allow men and women to come together because it was dangerous for the women and dangerous for the men. There is actually a women's thing where the women go out wilding. If you're study Greek, the way that they worship the gods, the Athenian worship, the women for one day went wilding in the woods. And you know what the men did? They hid because the women are out there with bows and arrows and knives and wilding. Does that sound safe to you? They might bring home a boar, they might not come home at all because they're, out in the wilderness dead. But they would go out and they would kill animals and sacrifice them to Athena and eat them supposedly raw. We don't know. There's not a lot of record for this stuff, but we know that these things happen. Very different kind of society and thinking. But remember, if you're eating meat 12 times a year, and they invite, hey, you want to go wilding, ladies, and we're going to have some meat. And you go, oh, baby, yeah, I'm ready for some steak, or whatever. Yes, sir.
It's not too different than what society today is trying to do. They're trying to take over the Christmas, making Kwanzaa or whatever it's called, and there's other things that they're trying to dumb down and take over.
Take the meaning of everything. Like Christmas is Santa, Easter is the Easter Bunny, and butterflies and stuff.
Yeah. Well, rabbits. We used to eat rabbits. Now what do? We have all kinds of stuff going on. I don't know what's going on with rabbits. Anyway, there are huge parallels between and whatever. I did mention this. I wanted to mention this. I think this is really important to always remember. We don't see evidence of any other place to come in. I think we look back at the destruction of Mesoklin. That was the wall around the temple. When I went to Greece, I should bring all the pictures. I looked for all the altars. Guess where all the altars are in the temples in Greece? Outside. Yeah, out front. They're never surrounded by a wall. They're never surrounded by a temple. All the sacrifices that were done on altars were done outside of temples. That's why the Greeks got really irritated with the Jews, because they were sacrificing an animal inside the temple, and that really irritated them. That's why they destroyed the Mesoklin. That's what caused the thing of desolation. By the way, you go to Greece, what are you going to get at every big meal? Pork, schwein, because in the Greek worldview, they used to sacrifice to Zeus the highest of their meat, which they considered to be pork. So that's where you got all your bacon lovers, right? So the Greeks were the original bacon lovers. Every time you eat, they're going to have pork, and it's all good. It's even better than Yoder, in my opinion. And they do a really good job making the pork. So all that pork that you got came from the Greek stuff. But that's what really irritated That's what really irritated the Greeks and irritated the Jews. That was the desolation of abomination that happened during the apocryphal time that's written about in the Maccabees, because they sacrificed pork, swine, to Zeus on the altar to God. And boy, that really caused a problem. And, then we get other issues. Anyway, the context, like I said, look at the concrete in the context of the words, and the concrete is more than just a man being cooked outdoors. Now we're talking about the shepherd and the sheep. So here, the one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. Now this is interesting. So we ask ourselves, well, really close to the temple. Really, we don't rate It gives us a general form, a sound down a name. So whose name? It could be the sheep's name, but I don't think it is. Whose name is it?
His own name, the shepherd's name.
The shepherd, or the name is God, Jehovah. You know, every time we've seen onoma in John, it's referred to the name of God. So I think this is an intentional, ambiguous statement in Greek. I don't think it means that he calls his own sheep by name. That's okay. You can go with that. That's all right. You know, I think what it implies is that, yes, he knows the name of his sheep, but the real implication is here that it's the name. He basically says the name of God. That's the name. So it's either the name of the shepherd or the sheep. Take it as however you like. It's one of those kind of things. And he leads them out.
I think it's kind of at the end of John, when Jesus is talking to Peter, feed my sheep 3 times. Is it the same word?
When we get there, we will see the feed that's the Gadon. Paimon and Gadon, right? So one is the feeder of the sheep, and the other one is feeding the sheep. And I haven't looked it up, so I can't say it with too much authority. But if you know German, there's a different word in German for an animal's mouth and a human's mouth. Maul and Mund. Mund is human, Maul is animal. When you feed an animal, it's different than feeding a human.
Different word for animal food.
That's right. Essen
Essen and Futter. Fressen, yeah, to eat, and then also the word for food, like Futter, I think it is, or something.
Yes. In most languages, the food of animals is different than the food of humans in the language itself. And it's true in Greek as well. So when you feed an animal, it's different than feeding your kids. As a matter of fact, one of the best words in German is halt Maul. You say halt Maul to a person, what are you telling them? Shut your animal mouth. It's like shut up in English, but it's very derogatory because you're implying the person is an animal or he's braying, right? So don't use that unless it's a very specific case because you can already get punched. Anyway, so here we got this term, the doorkeeper, the gatekeeper, the warden. You know, he names his own sheep. He speaks to his own sheep by name. In other words, by his name. So it refers both. In addition, he calls out his own from the flock. In other words, those who are his come to him. So you have a flock of sheep, and you call them because they hear the tone of your voice, right? What do sheep understand? Wah, 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 wah. I mean, that's what the dogs, your dog doesn't understand anything. They don't even understand their own name. But they hear your voice and they hear the tone and they know what you're saying. Wah, 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 wah. So they go to the door, right? Or they go to eat food, right? Usually you're holding the bowl and they go with the food. Anyway, it's not like they understand very much English at all. But in any case, we're all like sheep, right? When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them and his sheep follow him because they know his voice.
Well, I had heard one time the description of, in these settings, like a community would have all the different herds of sheep would be put away together at night. And so in the first thing in the morning, then the shepherd would come and they would call, and their sheep would follow him. And then another shepherd would call out his sheep. So it's like a whole mixture of sheep in one pen that belonged to multiple shepherds.
Yep, I'm disagreeing. I think it's true. I'm going to have a picture. I'm going to show you the picture of the way the pens were set up in the Jewish structure. And this may have had to be explained or may not. We don't know. We don't know how the Greeks exactly did their flocks, right? We don't know. We know how the Swiss did their flocks. How do we know how the Swiss did their flocks? Heidi, Schweinley and Barley, right? They had their own little thing, and the boy, the Peter would come get them, and Heidi would go with Peter, and Peter would take all the sheep. It wasn't one shepherd with a bunch with just his flock. He was getting all the sheep and goats from the different people and bringing them, which is a little bit different. Obviously not as large a flocks, but look, this is probably all good for our brains, right? We don't usually think about sheep and flocks, at least I don't anyway. Anyway, and then he put forth his own sheep. He goeth before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. Whenever is a much deed pertaining to self, all or the whole, he is thrown out in towards in time of them to transport, moving something from one destination port to another. That's that word, portadei, kai, the provata, the sheep to him, he walking the same road. This is that word. He walking the same road. That are because they see him with physical eyes, the tone of him. Inasmuch, all of his own, he has thrown them out in front of in time. Inasmuch, you remember, this is being addressed to the Pharisees, right? Jesus is Pharisees. And this is what he's telling them. They said, are we blind? And he says, inasmuch all his own, he has thrown them out in front of in time to transport, moving something from one destination to another. And he walking the same road with his sheep because they see him with physical eyes, his tone. In other words, can you be blind and follow this guy? Yeah, because why? The hearing of his voice and walking in the same road allows you to see with physical eyes. You see how this is an answer to the Pharisees?
Because of the chapter break, I never really considered this in relation to the previous narrative, but now that you pointed it out, it's coming right after the blind man episode and to the same people. Like, it's so obvious what a rebuke this is, because he keeps talking about hearing, right? The blind man couldn't see, but he could hear, and he figured it out. And he's talking about, like, the Pharisees think they control who's in and out because they threw this guy out, right? But he's like, nuh-uh, like, I am the one who determines who's in and out.
Yeah. The genius, if this weren't just, I think this is all Jesus' words, and John has taken them for us and captured them in the context of the dialogue in a way that, makes it a condensed dialogue, right? What he changed, I don't know if he changed anything. Maybe he changed nothing. Obviously, he's condensing this. He's not giving us all the setting like we want, right? But he's giving us the most important parts. And the problem that we have is, as you noted, if we just read this, right, it says, for the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. But wait. It doesn't say they know his voice. It says that are because Odasin. That means to see with physical eyes. Well, yes, I guess you can translate that to know, but it's a hugely different context if I say I can see with physical eyes because I hear your voice, right? As opposed to I see you with physical eyes because I what? I adeo you, I see you. The Greek is very specific and concrete. The English,
Well, as I said, this just helps it connect back to the prior dialogue. And in English, we totally miss that. Totally.
yeah, that's why even the, anyway, irony and joke. Jesus is saying that his sheep have been cast out. The impression is that he has cast them out. In other words, what do you do?
He's brought them out of the false teachings and the whole system that he constantly criticizes the religious leaders for.
Yeah, and who is he telling this to? His Pharisees. So hopefully they're getting it, right? That's the point. Just as a man who was born blind was cast out because he was convinced about Jesus, they are cast out to go on the same road with him. It's a play on words about teen hodos. It's a play on word about the way. At this time, John, right? John, we believe, was writing this after the fall of Jerusalem, about 90 AD, we think, about that period. So he's writing this late. Where is teen hodos? Teen hodos back in after the death of Jesus, it wasn't necessarily happy, but yet teen hodos, who cares? It's just, this new fad, this new thing, the way, right? What is it by this time?
An outcast.
Yeah, it's an outcast. So I got to be very cautious that I say teen hodos, right? So what did John imply? If they're walking in the same way, they're in the way. Yeah, and we're going to see this more and more. John is really tricky because John, remember in Mark, when we studied Mark, over and over again it said teen hodos, teen hodos. Of course, we translated that into the path, the street. I'm like, dudes, what are you doing to us? It tells us the way, the way, the way, over and over again, and yet you translate it as the passage, the street, the walk. I'm like, dudes, come on, stop it. We get John, and John is hiding these, using the terms in the Greek that obviously mean the same thing, but are concrete images of it. So when we see it, and we're going to see it more, we're going to see a lot more. They'll never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize the stranger's voice. In other words, they will be cast out of doors because of the stranger's voice. Strangers will not follow, flee from him, for they know the voice. To a belonging to another, but no, or not. They are laced, the quality of negation. They will together on the same road. They will together on the same road. Other things, contrariwise, they will flee away from him. That are because, no, or not, they see with physical eyes of the belonging to another the sound. This is really interesting. It's interesting in itself. It's almost repeated. But to a belonging to another, they will know not. That's that very strong negation. They will know not together on the same road. Contrariwise, they will flee away from him because they do not see with physical eyes of the belonging to another's the tone. Yeah, okay. So if you simplify this, they're not going to follow the other because of the sound of the voice. Notice it doesn't say anything about the seeing. The part that talks about seeing, the physical eyes, belonging to a tone. Almost repetitious, okay. Look what it says. They have to point this out to us. No, they have to point this out to who? The Greeks. They point out to the Greeks. Jesus used this figure of speech, but the Pharisees did not understand what he was telling them. These are his Pharisees. They had to tell the Greeks it's a figure of speech. Notice what it says here. This parable Jesus spake unto them, but they understood not what things that they spake to him. That's not the word. What is parable in Greek? Parabola, right? A near throw. That's not the word that's used. All through Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we get parabola. In John, it's not a parabola. In John, it's a paromemion. He shirat, the paromemion, I got down here an explanation. A near supposition. And that is translated as a parable or proverb, but I'm going to give you the actual definition here. He said to them, to Jesus, those ones there, but no are not egonation, they have known. Here's your known. Not physical eyes, but to know with your mind. Who, what, which it was, who, what, or which he was uttering to them. Here's the translation. This, the near supposition, Jesus said to them. But those ones there, they have not known what it was which he was uttering to them. Now, I want you to notice, there are no Pharisees in the King James translation. There are Pharisees in the NIV translation. Are there any Pharisees in the Greek? Who's he talking about? Not just the Pharisees, he's talking about his buds. It's not just Jesus' Pharisees. It's Matthew, it's Peter, Andrew, it's all of them.
Well, they never knew what he was talking about.
They never figured it out, right?
Well, not till later, not till after the resurrection, but yeah, at this point.
We're going to find that even when they're having the Last Supper, the last time Jesus really talked to them, they still had no clue. Oh, you know, okay, we probably would have no clue either. We got 2,000 years of, and we got all it written for us, right? Thank God that they wrote it down. But it's really funny. Here's this word, paroiminon, from a compound of para, near, and a derivative of onomai, to suppose or expect. In other words, a supposition. This is not a parable. This is literally, and I'm sorry I put a parable or a proverb. Okay, you can look at it kind of like that. But remember, this is Greek we're talking about. A parabola is a near throw. And I can draw a parabola right for you. Can I draw a paroiminon for you? Not really. This is literally a supposition.
Would it be something like metaphor or?
Yes, it's, you know, okay, I actually did, on my blogs, I've written about figures of speech. Do you know how many figures of speech there are in English? There are 300 different types of figures of speech in English. And I went through every one of them. There are hundreds. There are other types of figures of speech in other languages. And there are many figures of speech that we're not sure we've even identified. We believe we've identified 300. Some people have a little bit shorter list, 180. But their figures of speech are enormously powerful because we use figures of speech all the time in our language use and we don't even notice it, right? The Greeks, however, are a very peculiar society. They are very different. Just like they use the term in, and this term comes right out of the Odyssey, the wine dark sea. Some people have concluded that they had no word for blue because they called it the wine dark sea. That's not true. They do have two words that we know of for blue of different shades, but they very rarely talk about the sea as blue. I think they have a better perception than we do. Anybody ever looked at the sea in the Med? Is it blue? I never saw a blue sea in the Med. It's wine dark. It's gray. It's not blue. The skies may be blue. You want a blue sea? Where do you go?
Caribbean.
Yeah, Caribbean. You'll see a beautiful blue sea and you go, well, that's blue. But you're not going to see that in Greek land, man. I'm telling you. So, you
It's
know,
only when you get closer to the shore that it's really blue. When you get out into the real depth, it's like all the rest of the ocean.
It's very tough.
well, and the problem with the Greek Isles and all that Greek, what does it do? Are there many beaches?
Yeah, they're all
It's pretty
black.
rocky.
Got pretty white beaches. And
There are no white beaches, guaranteed.
Yeah.
They're all rocky beaches, and most of the beaches aren't beaches. They go, you know, like Santorini. You got to go 1,000 feet up on a donkey or a funicular to get up to the town. There ain't no beach. It's just rock, you know. And you got ships. You got ships with a 1,000-meter. They're really deep, right? Draft, and they're sitting right there on the dock. You go, oh, okay. Obviously, this is deep because it's all volcanic, right? It's volcanic isles. Interesting. Anyway, so the Greeks know about figures of speech. They just don't use them very often. They use them poetically. Of course they do. Everybody uses it poetically. But if you're doing a poem, what do you understand?
It's gonna be figurative.
Right? It's a figure of speech, right? But many times, look, the Greeks got to tell them. I'm not kidding. You know, the Greek mind is not like our mind. They're thinking the whole time, concrete, it's concrete, concrete. So if you're going to tell them it's a figure of speech, you got to better, it's a paramania, it's a near supposition. Because a parabola is not a figure of speech or a supposition, is it? A parabola is a near throw. It's a story. It's not a story. It could be true, but it's supposed to be a logos with a singular telos. Yeah, do you have a point?
I'm just trying to think, is a near supposition something like a close to a telos, or is there that kind of a relationship to it?
See, with a parabola, right? I know the parabola is a logos to a near throw, right? It's going to the axis. It's going to be like a Zeno paradox, right? I can never get to Athens because I only go halfway each time, but they know that's not true. So it's a near throw because, well, mathematically we're each hitting the limit, right? So it's going to have to go to a limited telos. This is not. This is a near supposition. So in other words, it can be read in more than one way. It's a figure of speech. Now, it didn't call it a hyperbola, a hyperbole, right, that has infinite number of telos. It didn't say it's a diabolo that is only 0 telos, right? Well, this is a different term for us, a new term for us, right? Let's see, is there any other notes I have here? You see, they say, especially an enigmatic or fictitious illustration. All right, was fiction invented in this time? No, even the word fiction did not exist. This is one of the biggest problems that I don't think the ancient world had. The ancient world would give stuff that they knew was made up. But they expected the average reader or hearer to understand when it was made up and when it wasn't made up. And when they needed to tell you, they would say, what? This is a pareiomenion. It's a near supposition. It's not a statement of fact. However, okay, let's see where it goes from here. Let me see how they got any more. John uses this term instead of parabola, and I think he does it on purpose. He doesn't use them interchangeably. Are they interchangeable in Greek? No, no word in Greek. Look, if I only got 20,000 words, now some Greek guy told us they have 1 million words. I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. The only language that has 1 million words is the English language. It's because they borrowed every one of them from other languages, you know. The Greeks may think they have 1 million words, but it's because they put together. No, I don't think you can even put them together. They have 20,000 words in the ancient Greek, and barely. And so you can't. Every word has to mean something. Yes, sir.
Well, I'm saying in English we have synonyms, but I'm assuming that they have very few, if any, synonyms.
No.
Words that mean the same thing, just a different way of saying it.
Matter of fact, an ancient Greek. A modern Greek could probably say, yeah, give me some synonyms. It's so cool because I want to borrow some of them words, right? No, an ancient Greek person, matter of fact, you guys remember one of the Socratic dialogues is all about language and how Greek language is the perfect language? Why? Because it doesn't have synonyms. It doesn't have any words that can be mistaken for other words. That's one of the arguments that Socrates uses. It's the perfect, it's not a barbaros tongue. It's not a barbarian's tongue because it's perfect. That's what the Greeks believed. And guess what? Everybody who learned Greek, that's what they're taught, right? That's what they're taught.
So if
So-
someone's trying to sell you a Greek thesaurus, it's probably.
At least an ancient Greek one.
In ancient Greek, the Greeks would say, yeah, you're going to list all the love words. Don't call your shield brother agape or eros. Oh, you might have a real problem there, buddy. Might smack you. Look what it says. Therefore, Jesus said again, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. Now, this would be nothing except look what it says. And I guess we'll have to end here, continue. And Jesus said to them, very, very, verily, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. He said, certainly accordingly, anew to them, Jesus, amen, amen. I make a logical argument to you. That are because I am, ego, imi, I am the thyra, the gate of the probaton. It didn't say that this is the figure of speech. It said the previous was the figure of speech. In this case, is Jesus making a figure of speech? There's no way that a Greek speaker can make a figure of speech by saying, ego, imi. He just said, ego, imi, I'm the gate of the sheep. And I got time to show you the picture. We'll start with this next week. This is literal and concrete statement. This is the way it worked in ancient Palestine or ancient Israel. This is the way it was. This is the sheep pen. Here's the sheepies. There's the shepherd. He is literally, not figuratively, the gate of the sheep. And the only way you're going to get out of here, and the only way a bad guy's going to come in is either crawl over the thing. But you know what? I suspect he's going to hear you if you're coming. Just saying. Anyway, thank you, Father, for your word. Pray you look out this week in your name we pray. Amen.
Just for your planning purposes, we're not going to have class on Sunday the 24th.